Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching India Today Global. The top story. It was a defining moment when US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in South Korea's port city of Busan. Handshakes, smiles and whispers. The meet influenced policies, both trade and foreign, of these countries, along with a shift in geopolitics. But a message that President Xi sent to the US. If MAGA was US slogan, so for Beijing, it is China first. The leaders decided on trade supplies ranging from soybeans to curbing the flow of fentanyl to the resumption of the flow of rare earth minerals. And the most important was President Trump's acknowledgement of China being a G2, a rare acknowledgement by an American president. More on this meet in this report by Mahashweta Lala.
Curtains were down as the much-anticipated and talked-about meeting between leaders of the two world's most powerful economies concluded in the South Korean port city of Busan. A meeting described as amazing by US President Donald Trump with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping saw major issues that created ripples across the global economy settled at the table. Reaffirming his good relations with friend Xi, Trump touted the Chinese president as a great leader of a great country. This comes a day after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis cancelled H-1B visa in state universities, affecting several Chinese students. President Xi began by expressing his happiness to meet Trump after a long time, but without any theatrics, talked about the recent US-China trade war, with both countries imposing tariffs and stalling import of several goods.
Given the different national conditions in China and the US, it cannot be avoided that we do not always see eye to eye with each other, and it is normal for the two leading economies of the world to have frictions now and then. And in the face of winds, waves and challenges, me and President Trump at the helm of China-US relations should stay the right course and ensure the steady sailing forward of the giant ship of China-US relations.
The 1 hour 40 minutes meeting between the two leaders was attended by aides within the close circle of both the leaders.
We're in agreement on so many elements, large amounts, tremendous amounts of the soybeans and other farm products are going to be purchased immediately, starting immediately. If you notice, President Xi authorized yesterday for China to start, did you know that, right? China to start buying in very large quantities of soybeans and other things, which I appreciated. That was a very nice gesture.
The meeting also brought an end to the long-stalled US soybean exports into the Chinese markets. A huge relief to the US farmers who voted for Trump during the presidential campaign, as a post on Truth Social announced the immediate purchase of soybeans by China.
The Chinese have agreed to buy 12 million metric tons of soybeans during this season, right now, between now and the should be January, and then for the next 3 years, they're going to be buying a minimum of 25 million metric tons per annum for the next 3 years.
Fentanyl, another bone of contention in the trade, saw 10% tariffs being slashed from 20%.
Many other things like that. On fentanyl, we agreed that he was going to work very hard to stop the flow. I've agreed, as you know, I put a 20% tariff on China because of the fentanyl coming in, which is it's a big tariff. And based on his statements today, I reduced it by 10%, so it's 10% instead of 20% effective immediately. I believe he's going to work very hard to stop the death that's coming in.
The other major trade barrier that prompted China to impose tariffs on export control was to settle the dispute over rare earth mineral. Trump said China agreed to keep the rare earth flowing to the world as a part of one-year agreement.
Negotiated at the end of a year, but all of the rare earth has been settled, and that's for the world. I mean, you know, worldwide. This, I guess you could really say this was a worldwide situation, not just a U.S. situation. So we continue to produce the rare earths and buy the rare earths and everything else, you know, when you see from other countries. But China is that whole situation, that roadblock is gone now. There's no roadblock at all.
The US president also discussed the Russia-Ukraine war but did not bring up China's purchase of Russian oil. The US has imposed additional tariffs on India and accused it of fueling the Russian war machine by purchasing oil from Moscow. The Trump's top aides have time and again talked about China's close proximity to Russia and being one of the biggest purchasers of Russian oil and energy. Washington never imposed additional tariffs on Beijing for this. But both the leaders did share concern over the Russia-Ukraine war, and Chinese president agreed to work in tandem with President Trump on the issue.
Ukraine came up very strongly. We talked about it for a long time, and we're both going to work together to see if we can get something done. We agreed the sides are, locked in and fighting, and sometimes you have to let them fight, I guess. Crazy. But he's going to help us, and we're going to work together on Ukraine. There's not a lot more we can do. He's been buying oil from Russia for a long time. It takes care of a big part of China. And, I can say India's been very good on that front. But we didn't really discuss the oil. We discussed working together to see if we could get that war finished.
Handshakes, whispers and smiles, symbolic gestures projecting that both leaders played a polite and diplomatic game on world stage, though being two tough competing world economies. Trump's recognition of China in the G2 gives it an upper hand and pushes it further to pursue its goal to achieve the numero uno status in the world. This is perceived as a win for China, as no US president in the past has ever acknowledged China's G2 status. The Group of Two, or the G2, originated in the late 2000s as an idea for the US and China to jointly steer global governance. Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
And Rohit Sharma joins me for more on this. Rohit has been tracking what's happening on that front when it comes to US and China. Rohit, a very important meeting there. There might not have been hugs. The warmth also not as evident as when you see Trump with Prime Minister Modi or even Xi Jinping, but substance, a lot got done.
Absolutely, Geeta. I think this was one of the most watched meetings after President Trump met with Vladimir Putin in Alaska in August of this year. I think a lot of Americans had a lot of interest in what these two leaders will meet and discuss. And we've seen a lot of things being said, especially on the American side about China. But I think what we saw today is the art of the deal by President Trump. He talks about extreme things. He throws everything at you, and then he wants you to come down, sit together, and discuss. And importantly, as you said, not a lot of warm shakes, not a lot of photo ops, but important stuff. There was a meat in the stuff that they discussed, and that is what we were able to see. The other important thing is that President Trump has been pressed domestically by the farmers on the soybean and purchase of US farm products, and also on the rare earth element. And today, when he lands back in Washington, D.C., he will have a message that he can drive home. So I think it's a big win for President Trump. Yes, not a big trade deal, but I think as far as President Trump is concerned, and also Xi Jinping, they can both go home and talk about how they're working together to resolve issues with two more important deadlines. One, a visit by President Trump in April to China, and then a follow-on meeting next year by Chinese Premier in America. Could be Florida, could be DC. So I think a very important meeting, and both parties can walk away by saying they achieved a lot today.
Right. When it comes to the rare earths minerals deal, are there details that are emerging? The lifting of the controls that China had put and imposed, is it going to be lifted? They'd written to various countries not to export to US. Will that be lifted? Because we're looking at tariffs coming down by a huge notch, which makes India hold that unenviable position of maybe a country with the highest tariff rates right now with the United States of America.
Right. China's, although they'll be paying 47%, still less than what India is paying today at 50%. And yes, after all that's being said and done, it's not a trade deal, but at least an agreement, a framework that we were talking about, Geeta. The other thing is, everybody on that table that we saw, from Lutnick to the other people on the table, their focus, I think, would not shift towards India. I think they've done what they wanted to do with China, and India remains the only other major power in the world that hasn't been able to come to a trade agreement. So yes, India will be feeling the pressure. At least New Delhi would be wanting to get a trade deal done. We've heard from sources here in Washington, D.C. and New Delhi that good things are happening. There's progress. But I think now President Trump and his team will move and shift their focus towards getting that elusive trade deal with India.
Okay, stay on with us. We'll discuss more of the US-China aspect in detail. But ahead of the meeting between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, Rohit, something very important happened. One is that China played its card, opening up and buying soybean from the United States of America. But on the other hand, Trump also had a hand to play. He wanted to play the nuclear race card. President Trump ordered the US military to immediately start the testing of nuclear weapons on an equal basis with China and Russia. The order was given minutes before the historic and amazing meeting between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea. It's also a major shift in US policy at a time when tensions are brewing among the nuclear-armed superpowers. Now, in a post on Truth Social, Trump said, and I quote, "The United States has more nuclear weapons than any other country. Russia is second, and China is a distant third, but will be even within 5 years. Because of other countries' testing programs, I have instructed the Department of War to start testing our nuclear weapons on an equal basis."
It had to do with others. They seem to all be nuclear testing. We have more nuclear weapons than anybody. We don't do testing. We've halted it many years ago. But with others doing testing, I think it's appropriate that we do also.
Any details around the testing, sir? Like where, when?
It'll be announced. We have test sites. It'll be announced.
Well, it was not clear if Trump was referring to a nuclear weapons test or a test of a nuclear-capable weapons system. In fact, such a test would be the first in 33 years. Since the 1990s, not one of the world's 3 major military powers conducted a nuclear weapons test. China conducted its last known test in 1996. The US last conducted a nuclear test in 1992, when it began a voluntary moratorium on such explosive testing. Though the date is not yet announced, a report by the Congressional Research Service says it would take 24 to 36 months for the US to test a nuclear weapon after the president gives the order. Now, the announcement also follows Russia's successful test of a nuclear-powered and nuclear-capable cruise missile, as well as a nuclear-powered torpedo. China and Russia have been developing and testing advanced weapons capable of delivering nuclear warheads. According to the Union of Concerned Scientists, Russia has around 6,000 warheads, and the US accounts for nearly 90% of the world's arsenal. China may also have 1,000 nuclear warheads by the end of the decade. During a military parade in Beijing in September, China showed off its nuclear triad for the first time, systems that can launch nuclear-capable missiles by land, sea, and air. US President Donald Trump also said he has given South Korea approval to build a nuclear-powered submarines.